Niece, I'll start you off with a strong, cinematic prologue, intro with a hook that's perfect for narration. I won't write any full chapter parts unless you tell me which one to write next. You said you want parts delivered step by step. Tell me write part 1 inch or whichever chapter you want, and I'll deliver approximately 1,000 words in the same voice. Here's the prologue. Night folded over the town like a palm closing, slow, soft, inevitable. Street lights bled into the horizon in warm, forgetful pools. Everything important had already gone to sleep: cars, televisions. The web of electric hum threading the houses. In Mira's room, the curtains were pulled tight against the moon. The small desk lamp she always left on cast a private island of amber across the bed. That island was where she slept, where she dreamed, where she kept the thin book of not-quite memories she had come to treat like a map through a place she could not otherwise trust. The first thing that changed was always a sound. Not the ordinary household noises, pipes, distant traffic, a dog, but a low, steady vibration, like a machine clearing its throat beneath the ground. Mira heard it the way you hear weather, present and indifferent. It lived under her bones and threaded the pillowcase. It made the hairs on her forearm fine as a tuning fork. Then the room would shift. The walls didn't move so much as unlearn their solidity. Light thin and pulled at the corners the way a tide drags pebbles. Time did something sloppy. It smeared. She could watch a minute fold into an hour without the usual scaffolding of action. No clock to mark the theft. In those hours she was both a passenger and the only witness left awake. In a world that had decided to sleep through its own miracles, you can read about this state in clinical papers and in late-night forums with more confidence than compassion. Isolated sleep paralysis, a somber doctor will say, fingers steepled. A friend will offer, too, the phrase hypnagogic hallucination, as if putting on the right technical coat would make the cold go away. But labels are like signposts in a dream, useful for direction, useless for what waits at the destination. Mira kept the signs anyway. She kept photographs of the sky taken at impossible hours, timestamps blurred by software and memory both. She kept the faint oval mark that had once appeared at the base of her skull and disappeared by morning like a tide line on skin. She kept her recorder, a cheap, battery-operated thing that often returned only white noise and the recorded groan of the house. Settling. Most of all, she kept a stubbornness, the sort that takes root when you have been dismissed by people who are supposed to help you. Doctors, friends, the internet's crowd of skeptics and believers who traded certainty like currency. Her first real encounter, the one that refused to be filed under clinical nomenclature or shrugged off as a sleep-paged hallucination, happened the year she turned 27, when the boundary between sleep and waking became porous enough to walk through. She was alone in the little house she'd inherited from her grandmother, a place with thin floorboards and windows that looked kind of apologetic about the view. Outside, the world was stitched with yellow sodium lamps. Inside, Mira's mind was threaded with a curiosity that had no patience for polite doubt. It began with a dream that smelled like copper and rain on hot pavement. In the dream, she stood at the edge of a field that used to be a baseball diamond, long since consumed by golden weeds. The sky above it was a bruise, deep indigo washed with a strange, cold green. Stars blinked like distant devices. In the center of that bruise there was a shape, bright and geometrical, not obedient to earthly light. It hummed with the polite confidence of something ancient and precise. When she reached out, the light did not warm her skin. Instead, it imprinted a pattern across the inside of her wrist. Like a temporary tattoo made by heat and geometry. She woke to the same sensation of presence, the same anchored vibration beneath the floor, more real than the curtains, more real than the lamp. It took a moment, that dislocating, animal pause, to remember that she used to wake into mornings with Sunday names, with breakfast smells and plans. Now memory required an inventory, marks, missing minutes, the shredded oddness of time. On the bedside table her phone read 3:31. The minutes scrolled like a film reel stuck on the same frame. The cheap recorder's red light blinked once and then fell mute. Her wrist felt strange. When she turned it, the pattern from the dream was there, faint, precise, impossible. a set of tiny nodes and lines that ran like a topographic map. She touched it and found skin warmed as if by a fever. People will tell you how easy it is to rationalize away things like this: stress, late-night horror movies, too much coffee. Mira had tried those rationalizations like clothes she did not like. They never fit. After that night, there were gaps in her memory she could not reconstruct. She could find the clothes she had been wearing, folded in clean symmetry, but not remember the act of undressing. She could hold the smell of ozone and dish soap and not be able to place where it belonged. Her phone contained fragments, a photograph of the backyard taken from an angle higher than any tree could give, a video of a sliver of sky with no stars and a single, steady pulse of pale light. There were timestamps she couldn't explain and battery drains that made no sense. Other people had stories like hers. They found each other in rooms named at 2 a.m. usernames and forums, typed in the language of the undone. Wokeet 3, Blue Oval, Sleepless Maps. They swapped details like travelers swap high-altitude signs, the same symbols, the same hum, the same strange geometry left on skin like evidence that a different logic had visited. Some of them swore they had been taken from beds, from cars, from the floor of an office while the world outside hummed with its categories. Others were more merciful. They called it a visitation of dreams, a private cinema where the mind rehearsed cosmic metaphors and called them physical. Then there were the photographs from places that should not have photographs. Security cameras that captured a thin, white figure in the hallway of a home where all rooms were locked. A dash cam that recorded the sky splitting for a fraction of a second, then returning as if embarrassed. A police report with a blank paragraph where an explanation should have been. Mira stored all these things in a file on her laptop called Noted. She did not know exactly why she kept them, except that when you live in a pattern, you want to see if the pattern repeats. Patterns make a toothless world understandable. Repetition is a kind of comfort. The pattern told her that whatever visited sometimes preferred delicate webs of light, sometimes cold hollows in the throat, sometimes the paralysis that pinned a body like a butterfly beneath glass. It told her that the phenomenon was not kind to certainties. On the morning that would change everything, she found something different. A photograph on her fridge, not her photo, not taken by her, a grainy black and white shot of her sleeping position on the bed. The angle was wrong. This was not the vantage of any camera in her house. Someone had been in the room. The photograph had been printed on paper as if someone had wanted the evidence to be more than an ephemeral file. There are moments that are quiet in their violence. She held the photograph with both hands and felt the skin of the world slip. Her breath left her like a small animal escaping danger. The house seemed to exhale with her. The hum under the floor got louder, and in the far distance, or very near. The mind cannot always tell. There was a sound like a gate opening. If the house had a heartbeat. It had just skipped out. Mira set the photograph on the table and sat very still. The room seemed thinner, as if the walls had been replaced by something translucent. The lamplight dimmed, not as if someone touched the bulb, but as if someone in the room decided to redraw its edges. Then the bedroom door, which had been closed, made the single, impossible choice to click open. Slow, deliberate, and the darkness beyond it was not the darkness of the hallway. It was an absence that hummed. Mira's eyes locked to the doorway. There was no intruder in the conventional sense. The space itself held a shape, a silhouette that should not have moved yet did. Like a suggestion of movement left by a shudder. She felt the air on her cheek as if the world had inhaled and then held its breath. And then she realized, with the cold electrical clarity of someone who has watched a dream fold into waking, that the hum carried a pattern she had not heard before. It was a voice without words, a geometry of sound that threaded the whole house and seemed to read her like a living thing. Reads lines on paper. She reached for her wrist, the place where the dream had left its temporary map. Her fingers brushed the faint nodes and the lines. This time they were warm, pulsing with a slow patience. Like a heartbeat translated into light, somewhere in the darkness a sound shifted. A step not a foot on floor, but of something rearranging a room that had been structured for human minds. Mira realized, with a sinking clarity that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition, that the thin thread between one state and another had been cut. The doorway darkened into a shape. A pale geometry of light coalesced and pointed, gently, toward her. She did not know then whether she would wake to a photograph on her fridge, a hospital bed, or a laboratory table with strangers wearing sterile smiles. What she knew, like a person who has been taught the language of their own scars, was only that she had been chosen by an insistence that did not care for her consent. The light touched the threshold. The hum folded itself into something like a hand. Outside, the night continued to keep its secrets. Inside, Mira held the photograph until the paper buckled at the edges. She blinked. And then she was not where she had been. Mira had never been afraid of the dark. Even as a child, when shadows stretched their limbs across the walls of her grandmother's old house, she would lie awake, listening. She liked the way the night had layers, the distant hum of traffic like a tide, the rustle of trees outside her window, and, beneath all of it, the silence that pressed against her chest like a heavy quilt. That silence was never empty. It was alive, waiting. By 27, Mira had grown used to this stillness, but lately it had changed. She would slip into bed, wrap herself in the soft ritual of routine, lamp on, journal by the pillow, recorder resting nearby, and wait for sleep to take her. Yet instead of dreams, something else arrived. The humming. It was faint at first, almost like the refrigerator downstairs or a passing truck rattling the road. But as the weeks went on, the sound grew more insistent, resonating through her bones as if the bed frame itself were a tuning fork. The noise seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, a low vibration crawling into her bloodstream, erasing the line between her body and the room around her. She wrote about it in her journal, her handwriting looping tighter each night. 3:18 a.m. hummed stronger tonight. Felt it in my teeth. Lights flickered. Couldn't move arms for a few seconds. Not dream, real. The paralysis was new. It came without warning, a sudden stillness that pinned her down like invisible hands. Her eyes would dart frantically, but her limbs refused her commands. At first she panicked, thrashing inside her mind, screaming silently for release. But the more it happened, the more she noticed something else. The paralysis was always followed by a presence. She couldn't describe it in simple words. It wasn't a person standing in the room, nor was it the feeling of being watched. It was heavier, more invasive, like something was studying her from the inside out. A consciousness brushing against hers, cold and precise, peeling her open like a page in a book. One night she awoke gasping, free from the invisible grip, and found herself staring at the ceiling. But it wasn't her ceiling anymore. The plaster had melted into smooth, seamless metal that glowed faintly as though lit from within. Symbols like constellations floated across its surface, rearranging themselves when she blinked. She tried to sit up, but her body was stiff, sluggish, as though gravity itself had doubled. The air was sharp, metallic, tinged with ozone. Her pulse hammered. Not a dream, not a dream, not a dream. And then, just as suddenly, she was back in her bedroom. The cracked paint of the ceiling, the faint hum of her desk lamp, the curtains shifting gently with the night breeze. The world had returned, but something inside her insisted it had not been a trick of the mind. The transition had been too clean, too deliberate, like someone had thrown a switch. The next morning, she found the marked dot at the inside of her left wrist. A faint pattern shimmered under the skin, not a bruise, not ink, not even quite visible under certain angles of light. It looked like a lattice of dots and lines, perfectly geometric, as though drawn by a machine. When she pressed her finger to it, warmth pulsed back, a rhythm too regular to be her heartbeat. Mira's stomach clenched. She rushed to the bathroom mirror and held her wrist under the glare of the bulb. The pattern was real, and it was alive. Her first instinct was to panic, to scrub at it with soap and water until her skin burned red. But the pattern remained, glowing faintly, as if amused by her attempts. Later, under the dull gray of morning light, it faded, almost disappearing into her skin. She called her best friend, Donnie, choking on the words as she explained. Donnie listened in silence, then sighed in that familiar, half-teasing, half-worried way. Sleep paralysis, Mira. You've read about it, haven't you? It's your brain playing tricks, hallucinations, weird body reactions. You've been under stress. That's all. Mira almost wanted to believe it. But stress didn't explain the humming. It didn't explain the symbols that moved like stars across a metal ceiling she wasn't supposed to see. And it didn't explain the mark that now felt like a secret carved into her body. That evening, Mira did something she rarely allowed herself to do. She searched online. She typed shaky words into forums. Sleep paralysis, alien symbols, hum vibrations. Can't move, real encounters. The screen flooded with stories, usernames hiding behind avatars of stars, galaxies, crescent moons. The hum is the first sign, one post read. When you can't move, they're closest. Another user wrote, check your skin in the morning. They always leave something behind, and the most chilling of all, a comment from someone calling themselves Sleepless Maps. If you see the geometry, you're marked. They come back for the marked. Mira slammed the laptop shut. The silence in her room pressed tighter, thicker. Even with the lamp burning beside her, she felt the shadows stretching, listening. For hours she sat awake, heart rattling against her ribs, eyes darting to the window, the door, the cracks in the floor. Every hum of the house sounded like the signal of something drawing near. Finally, exhaustion claimed her, and she let herself drift into sleep. But sleep offered no mercy. She dreamed of standing in that field again, the one from before, the golden weeds swaying like whispers, the sky bruised with green and indigo. The geometric shape hovered above, precise and blinding. Its edges pulsed, its symmetry alive. This time, it opened. A beam of soft, silvery light poured down. Swallowing her shadow, she lifted her wrist, and the glowing lattice burned brighter, as if answering the call. And then she heard it, not the hum, but something hidden inside it. A voice, not words, but intention. It reached into her mind like fingers pulling aside a curtain. Awake, her eyes snapped open. The lamp was still on. The recorder's red light still blinked on the table. But the hum was louder, so loud it rattled the window glass. Mira's body was locked again, frozen beneath invisible weight. Only her eyes could move, wide with terror, darting to the corner of the room. And there it was, a figure, pale, elongated, standing half in shadow, half in her reality, watching. The figure stood impossibly still. Its presence was heavier than its shape, tall, narrow, framed in the soft spill of her lamp as though it had been drawn in thin strokes of moonlight. It wasn't quite solid, not quite shadow, but Mira's body knew it was real. Every nerve lit up in icy recognition, the way prey knows when the predator is already watching. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. She willed her arms to move, to throw the blanket aside, to scramble for the door. But her body betrayed her. The paralysis held her like stone poured into the shape of skin. The hum in the air deepened, threading the walls, vibrating the mattress springs beneath her. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was inside her ears, her teeth, the blood running through her veins. It was language without words, pressing against her skull like an instruction she couldn't quite decipher. The figure tilted its head, impossibly slow, as though studying her reaction. Mira's eyes burned with tears she couldn't blink away. Then, from the corner, the figure moved. Not with steps, with presence. One moment it occupied the shadow, the next it seemed closer, as though distance itself had thinned. Its long, pale outline shimmered, edges blurring like heat rising off asphalt. The room bent with it. Objects around it, the dresser, the books on the floor, seemed to warp, as if reality itself disliked being near. Mira's throat ached as she tried to scream, but no sound escaped. Only a thin, strangled breath left her lips, and then it was at her bedside. The hum sharpened, focused, until it became a tone so pure it pierced her mind like a needle. Her thoughts scattered. Memories spilled loose, flashes of her childhood, her grandmother's face. The sound of rain on a tin roof. She wasn't controlling the playback. The figure was. It was rifling through her, turning the pages of her life without permission. Her wrists burned. The lattice beneath her skin glowed faintly in answer. The figure extended something. Not quite a hand, not quite anything human. A limb both too long and too delicate, as if woven from threads of light. It hovered above her wrist, tracing the pattern without touch. The glow pulsed brighter, sensing with the hum, sensing with her own heartbeat. A pressure swelled inside her skull, pushing at the edges of thought, demanding entrance. She tried to resist, to lock her mind like a door, but the force was patient, unhurried. It was not asking permission. The room fell away. Suddenly she wasn't lying in bed anymore. She was standing, barefoot, weightless, in a space vast and endless. The floor beneath her was glassy, reflecting a horizon that didn't exist. Overhead, a sky full of shifting constellations pulsed, their stars arranging and rearranging in mechanical patterns too precise to be random. And around her, towering forms stood in a circle, figures like the one in her bedroom, but taller, sharper. Their pale outlines bending light as though they belonged to another physics. Their elongated heads tilted in unison, observing her with faceless intent. The hum was all around her now, vibrating her chest, her bones, her very thoughts. Mira clutched her glowing wrist, the only warmth in this sterile expanse. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, though her voice sounded small, distorted, as if swallowed before it left her lips. The hum shifted. The constellation above rearranged itself. Stars slid into lines, forming a shape, a circle, intersected by a triangle. The pattern burned into her vision, familiar and strange. She gasped. It was the same geometry etched into her wrist. The tallest figure leaned closer. A sound bloomed inside her skull. Not spoken, not heard, but known, chosen. Her knees buckled. The word wasn't language. It was an impression, an absolute. She felt it in her stomach, her heart beat, her teeth. Chosen. But for what? The circle of beings closed slightly, their outlines flickering like starlight through fog. The constellation above her shifted again, pulsing brighter, almost urgent. Mira clamped her hands over her ears though the sound was inside her, unrelenting. The lattice on her wrist flared so brightly she saw veins and bones beneath her skin. A warmth spread up her arm, racing into her chest, flooding her body with light. Her breath hitched as if drowning, her heart racing to match some external rhythm. She staggered, her body barely her own. And then, the light folded, Mira gasped awake. She was back in her bedroom, sweat cooling on her skin, her chest heaving as though she'd run for miles. The lamp still burned dimly. The recorder's red light still blinked. The hum was gone. The corner of the room was empty. For a moment she thought she had dreamed it all, that her mind had woven a nightmare too sharp to distinguish from reality. But when she lifted her left wrist, the pattern was still there, glowing faintly, fading only when she blinked. She pressed trembling fingers against it. But this time the warmth didn't retreat. It pulsed beneath her skin, steady and alive. As though sensing to a heartbeat that wasn't hers, her stomach dropped. On the dresser across the room, something new sat waiting. A small object, metallic, triangular, no larger than her palm. It hadn't been there before. Its surface shimmered faintly with the same geometric patterns as her wrist. Symbols pulsing in quiet rhythm. Mira froze, unable to move, barely able to breathe. The object seemed to hum softly, just enough for her bones to feel it. And then, the triangle blinked. The object glimmered faintly in the lamplight. Its surface wasn't smooth. It seemed alive, shifting, like ripples sliding across metal. Mira's breath snagged in her throat. She didn't remember moving it. She didn't even own anything remotely like it. Yet there it was, perched on the dresser like it had always belonged there. The triangular shard pulsed with a soft glow, its light sensing in time with the faint rhythm still throbbing in her wrist. Each pulse seemed to pull at her, calling her attention, tugging at the edges of her mind like an insistent whisper. Mira swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her body carefully. This time, the paralysis was gone. Her muscles trembled, but they obeyed. She padded across the room barefoot, every board creaking like a warning. Closer now. She could see the object more clearly. Its surface was etched with tiny grooves, not scratches, but deliberate, microscopic patterns that seemed to rearrange themselves depending on the angle of her gaze. They formed symbols, then maps, then constellations. A language she didn't know yet somehow understood in fragments. Her fingers hovered above it. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the dresser into her skin. She swallowed hard. Okay, she whispered, her voice quivering in the stillness. If this is real, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. She reached out and touched it. The triangle bloomed with light. The room dissolved. Mira was weightless again, but not in the infinite, cold expanse from before. This was different. She was standing, or floating, inside a chamber shaped like a sphere, its walls lined with flowing, liquid metal. The surface rippled like mercury disturbed by invisible winds. Symbols spiraled across it in perfect synchronization, rearranging themselves into constellations that looked both alien and familiar. At the chamber's center hovered a massive triangular structure, identical to the shard on her dresser, but large enough to tower over her. Its surface glowed with shifting colors, each shade vibrating like a chord in a song she couldn't fully hear. Her wrists burned with heat. She glanced down. The lattice beneath her skin pulsed, answering the massive triangle's rhythm. The chamber hummed, not just sound, sensation. The walls thrummed against her bones, against her memories. She felt her childhood again, her grandmother's lullabies. Nights spent stargazing with a telescope in the backyard. The whisper of bedtime stories about other worlds. They didn't feel like memories anymore. They felt. Seated, placed, she staggered, clutching her wrist. Why me? She breathed. Why are you showing me this? The answer wasn't words. It was vision. The chamber dissolved into images, projected directly into her mind. She saw Earth from orbit, clouds curling over blue oceans. Then, a vast black expanse pierced by impossible structures. Towers that stretched across stars like scaffolding holding reality together. Beings moved between them, pale silhouettes, elongated, faceless. Their presence was colder than distance, older than time. Then came the others. Flickering shapes of humans, plucked from fields, cars, bedrooms. Eyes wide with terror, limbs stiff with paralysis. She saw them lifted, studied, marked. Some were returned, others not. Her stomach twisted, nausea rising. Chosen, the voice pressed again, louder this time, vibrating through her ribcage. The vision shifted. Now she saw herself. She was lying on a metallic table, her wrists glowing brighter than ever, her chest rising and falling as the pale beings leaned close. Above them hovered the same triangle, its light focused on her like a scalpel of energy. Her scream caught in her throat. No, no, stop. The vision broke. The chamber folded. Mira collapsed back into her bedroom. Her palms hit the floorboards, her breath ragged, sweat dripping from her temples. The triangle sat quietly on the dresser again, dim now, as if nothing had happened. She scrambled backward, pressing her back against the wall, eyes fixed on it. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but adrenaline kept her wide awake. The recorder still blinked. Red and steady. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the nightstand. The sound made her flinch violently. She lunged for it, hands shaking. On the screen, a notification glowed. One new voicemail. But she hadn't heard it ring. With dread crawling up her throat, she tapped play. The voicemail was nothing but static at first, a low hiss, punctuated by faint clicks. Then came the hum, the same deep, vibrating hum that had haunted her nights. Louder, clearer, and threaded inside it. Barely audible, a voice, Mira. Her blood ran cold. The voice was inside her name, stretching it, bending it. Male and female at once. Alien and familiar. She dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. The voicemail continued, muffled but insistent. The hum swelling until the room itself seemed to vibrate with her name. She clamped her hands over her ears, rocking back against the wall. But the sound wasn't coming from the phone anymore. It was inside her head, inside her bones. Chosen. The lamp flickered violently, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. For a heartbeat, silence returned. Mira dared to breathe, her chest heaving in the void. Then, across the room, the triangle blinked again, brighter this time. The air grew cold, electric, charged with impossible weight. And from the corner, where the shadow had stood before, the darkness thickened, reshaping into something tall, watching, waiting. The shadow in the corner swelled like ink dropped in water. Mira's eyes strained to track its edges, but every time she focused, the figure seemed to stretch, blur, reform. Her lamp was dead. The only light came from the pulsing triangle on the dresser, casting faint silver ripples that painted her walls in trembling geometries. Her body pressed harder into the wall. Breath shallow, fingers clutching at the floorboards for anchor. "Please," she whispered, though her voice was more air than sound. "Please, not again." The figure tilted forward, its elongated shape bending as if gravity had no claim on it. Its presence was suffocating, the room smaller now, the ceiling lower, the air compressed. The hum returned, louder than ever, threading her skull with pressure until her vision swam. Her wrist flared. The lattice beneath her skin pulsed so brightly she thought it might burst from her flesh. It wasn't just a mark anymore. It was alive, synchronizing with the hum, sensing with the triangle. Sensing with the thing in the corner. The figure drifted closer, not walking, not floating, simply writhing, shrinking distance with intention alone. And then, in her head, not her ears, the voice returned. "You will listen." Her teeth rattled with the force of it. Mira tried to scream, but the sound came out choked, crushed by the weight of the command. She clutched her wrist instinctively, her fingers pressing against the hot lattice. The glow pulsed faster, like a heartbeat panicking beneath her skin. The triangle on the dresser flared, brighter, brighter, until it became impossible to look at. Its surface unfolded, light bending into shapes that spun into the air like shards of glass suspended in gravityless space. Symbols swirled, arranging into constellations, then maps, then something else, instructions. Mira's vision blurred, her mind crumpling under the rush of images pouring in. A field of golden weeds under a bruised sky. A ship hovering like a wound in the atmosphere. A circle of pale figures standing in silence. The same table from her earlier vision, only this time, her body wasn't alone. Others were there. Dozens, hundreds, lying stiff beneath beams of white light, their wrists glowing with the same lattice as hers. Faces slack, frozen between terror and surrender. Her stomach lurched violently. "Not just me. Not just me." The voice thickened inside her skull. "The marked are linked. The lattice is the bridge." She staggered to her feet, clutching her head, trembling with defiance. "I don't want this. Take it back. Take it off me." The figure's head tilted, a motion both mechanical and curious. "It cannot be undone. You carry the frequency now. Through you, the message travels." Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. "What message? Why me?" The triangle pulsed. A new vision seared across her mind, a planet, Earth, split by glowing fractures. Grids of light tearing across continents. Human cities blinked out like extinguished candles. Above it all hovered the geometric ships, indifferent and massive, weaving patterns in the sky. Mira screamed, clawing at her temples as if she could rip the vision out. "No, no, stop." The images dissolved, leaving her gasping, kneeling on the floor. Her skin tingled with static. Her ears rang as though she had been standing in front of a roaring engine. The shadow loomed inches away now. Cold, impossibly cold, rolled off it in waves. It extended one long limb, threads of light woven into the suggestion of fingers. It hovered just above her temple. Her breath hitched. Her chest locked. She couldn't move. The touch landed. It wasn't pressure. It wasn't even physical. It was inside. A current surged through her brain, threading neurons, stitching memories, rewriting pathways. Her vision went white-hot, and for an endless second, she saw everything: stars, ships, cities, beings, patterns. Lifetimes stacked on lifetimes. When her eyes snapped open again, she was still in her bedroom. But everything looked wrong. The walls glowed faintly with the same lattice patterns as her wrist. Symbols swirled in the air like invisible ink revealed. The hum was no longer sound, but sight of vibrating waves painted across her vision. She could see it, filling every corner, wrapping around the figure, linking it to the triangle. Linking it to her. Her recorder blinked steadily on the nightstand. For the first time since she'd bought it, she realized it wasn't broken or cheap. It had been waiting. The red light pulsed in sync with her wrist, and then the voice, softer this time, but still heavy enough to bend thought. "You will carry it. You will deliver it. The others will know." The hum faded, and with it, the figure dissolved back into shadow. bleeding into the walls until nothing but the triangle remained. Faintly glowing, Patient Mira collapsed onto the bed. Shaking violently, the room was silent again. Only her ragged breaths broke the stillness. But when she reached for the recorder with trembling fingers, the red light flicked twice, and then the machine spoke. Not static, not white noise, but her own voice. "They are coming." Mira dropped the recorder as though it burned. Her heart pounded in her throat. The silence thickened again. The triangle blinked once more. And outside her window, in the distance above the tree line, a faint white light hovered in the sky, steady, watching. The recorder lay on the floor, its tiny red light dark now. But Mira couldn't unhear what it had spoken in her own voice. "They are coming." Her wrists still burned faintly beneath the skin, the lattice glowing like embers cooling after a storm. She pressed her palm against it, trying to ground herself, but the more she touched it, the more it pulsed in response, as though alive. Her eyes darted toward the window. The hovering light beyond the tree line remained fixed, unblinking, as if waiting for her to notice. A pressure pushed against her chest, not fear alone, but something magnetic, insistent. She stumbled to the glass, half expecting the light to vanish once confronted. Instead, it brightened. Another answered beside it. Then a third. Slowly, deliberately, a triangle formed in the sky. Humming low like a tuning fork pressed against her ribs, her breath fogged the pain. No, not again. Not now. But something inside her wrists answered back, and the hum deepened, her legs weakened. She dropped into the chair by the window, clutching herself. The memories of the other abductees, the rows of them lying still under beams of light, echoed in her skull. Were they real? Or was her mind folding dreams into memory? The air shifted. A soundless ripple vibrated through the room, scattering her scattered thoughts. The triangle on the dresser, still glowing faintly, brightened once more. And this time, its light expanded into the air, filling the room with a projection like a hologram. Mira's breath froze in her throat. People, faces. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Men, women, children. Some with fear etched deep into their features, others slack and dazed, their eyes unfocused. And every one of them bore the same glowing lattice on their wrists. The image flickered as though reaching across impossible distance. A man appeared closest to her, his hair disheveled, his face drawn. His lips moved, and though no sound came from him, the message landed directly in Mira's head. "You see us," she gasped. Who are you?" The man's image wavered but held. "Like you. Marked. Taken. Returned." The chorus swelled. Dozens of voices, layered and overlapping, all pouring into her mind at once. "We dream the same dreams. We see the same lights. We are called back." Her pulse throbbed. She shook her head violently, pressing her palms against her ears as if she could block them out. No, you're not real. You're not." The child nearest the edge of the projection lifted her hand. A lattice glowed there, identical to Mira's. The same shapes. The same rhythm. Mira's wrists burned in response. The projection sharpened. The crowd of faces pressed closer, as though begging her to listen. Their mouths moved in unison now, their combined voice a tidal wave across her thoughts. "The bridge is opening. Through us, they will arrive." Her stomach dropped. "What bridge? What do you mean?" The man leaned closer until his image filled her vision. His eyes were hollow with exhaustion, but behind them flickered the same faint light as her wrist. "You will understand when they come for you again, when you stand among us." When the sky opens, the triangle dimmed, and one by one, the faces vanished, dissolving back into streaks of silver that fluttered like ashes in the dark. Mira collapsed forward, trembling. Sweat slicked her skin. She pressed her forehead against her knees, fighting the swell of nausea and panic. "It's just dreams," she whispered to herself. "It's just sleep paralysis. Just my brain breaking." But the silence that followed wasn't comfort. It was expectant. She dared another glance at the recorder. The red light was on again. Click. Her own voice spilled out once more. But this time, it wasn't just a warning. "They're gathering us. We are not alone. The bridge will open." Her lips parted in horror. She hadn't spoken those words. She'd been silent, folded in on herself. but the recorder carried her voice anyway, calm and steady. Like a future version of her had already said it, her skin crawled. Before she could lunge forward to shut it off, the light outside flared so brightly it bled into the room like daylight. The walls vibrated with the hum, the floorboards shivering beneath her feet. Vera stumbled to the window, squinting against the glow. The triangle in the sky was no longer distant. It was closer, much closer. Each point of light stretched downward into beams that pierced the forest below, turning the trees into black silhouettes against the silver radiance. The ground shook faintly, as though something enormous had landed far off but was making its way closer. She whispered, barely able to form the words. "Oh God, they're here." Her wrist flared so brightly she could see the lattice shining through her skin, a beacon she couldn't hide. Her body locked in place, suspended between terror and awe, and then, from the forest below, she saw them dot figures moving through the trees, their shapes tall and thin, bending light around them as they walked. Not shadows this time, clearer, sharper, too real to deny. Dozens of them, all coming toward her cabin. The forest glowed silver. Through the thin veil of trees, Mira saw them, shapes impossibly tall, their limbs long and deliberate, their movements too smooth, too synchronized. They didn't step so much as glide, bending reality around them. Each time she tried to lock her eyes on one, the figure blurred at its edges, as if her mind rejected the details. The beams of light descending from the triangle above guided them, each figure moving in perfect rhythm, as though pulled by invisible strings. Their presence collapsed distance. 1 second they were at the tree line, the next, closer. The next, closer still. Her heart battered her ribs. The glow in her wrist pulsed wildly, responding to theirs. She pulled her sleeve down instinctively, as if the cloth could hide it. But the heat was unbearable. Her skin buzzed with a frequency that wasn't hers anymore. She staggered back from the window, pressing against the wall, but the air itself vibrated with their approach. It was inside her chest, inside her teeth, inside her skull. She couldn't escape it. The triangle on the dresser flared alive once more, spilling silver light across the room. The hum deepened until the glass in the window trembled. The lattice symbols bloomed across her walls again, filling the cabin with shifting maps and languages she couldn't understand but felt. The recorder clicked on by itself. A distorted version of her voice whispered through the static, "Do not resist. The bridge opens tonight." Mira covered her ears. "No, stop. I didn't say that. I don't want this." But the symbols swirled faster, converging into a circle that hovered in the air, shimmering with impossible depth. It wasn't a picture. It was a door. The knock came then. 3 soft raps against her cabin door. Gentle, ordinary, wrong. Mira froze, every muscle locking. The figures were outside. She knew they were outside. And yet the knock carried the cadence of a polite visitor, as though someone had stopped by to borrow sugar. Her breath shook out of her. She clutched her wrist, whispering to herself, "Don't answer. Don't answer." The knock came again, firmer. Then again, rattling the frame. Her body betrayed her. Step by step, she shuffled toward the door, each footfall heavy as stone. Her hand trembled as it reached for the knob. The glowing lattice under her skin burned brighter with every inch closer. She yanked her hand back at the last second, clutching it to her chest. "No, you're not real. You're not." The door creaked open on its own. A gust of icy air swept inside, carrying with it the faint scent of ozone and earth. The hum roared louder, filling every cell in her body with vibration. Beyond the threshold stood one of the figures, taller than the frame should allow. Its head brushed the lintel, yet didn't bow. Its skin wasn't skin, but shifting light, woven in patterns her eyes slid off of. It didn't enter. It simply stood there, waiting. Her wrist throbbed like a drum. The figure raised its elongated hand, and on its palm glowed a lattice identical to hers. The connection hit instantly. Her body locked in place as her mind split open. Images rushed in, endless corridors of light, rows of humans marked and waiting. Ships drifting in black space like silent cathedrals. Voices layered over one another, whispers, warnings. Chants, all funneling into a single thought. "You are part of us now." Her knees buckled. She collapsed to the floor, tears streaking down her face. I don't want to be. Please, I don't want this. The figure tilted its head, considering. Its voice unfurled inside her mind, heavy and certain. One is irrelevant. The bridge requires anchors. You are chosen. The cabin dissolved around her. One blink, and she was no longer on the floor, but lying again on the cold table, bathed in blinding white light. Figures surrounded her, their hands extended. Their eyes, or what passed for eyes, focused entirely on her wrist. She struggled, but her limbs refused to obey. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed before it left her throat. The lattice on her wrist exploded in brightness, the glow spreading through her veins like molten fire, racing up her arm, across her chest. She arched in pain as the light seared into her heart, into her skull. Above her, the ceiling dissolved into a vision of the earth below, a pale blue sphere, fragile and small. Webs of light spread across its surface. The same lattices she carried now etched into the planet itself. And then she saw them, the others. Hundreds, thousands of humans suspended in beams of light, their wrists glowing in unison, their bodies limp but alive. A vast network of the marked, scattered across the globe, connected by the same unbearable frequency. Her pulse synced with theirs, her thoughts tangled in theirs. For a moment, she wasn't Mira anymore. She was we. The hum reached a crescendo. The voice filled her completely. The bridge is ready. Through you, the opening begins. Her vision fractured into shards of white, and when it cleared, she was back in her cabin. The door stood wide open, the night air flooding in. The triangle outside hovered impossibly close, so massive now it blotted out the stars. Beams of light rained down into the forest, tearing shadows into strips of silver. The ground shook as the visitors drew near. Her recorder blinked red dot. Her voice, calm and steady, spoke again. This is not a dream. This is the beginning. Mira's breath caught. She turned toward the open doorway. One of the tall figures stepped inside. The figure crossed the threshold. Its presence swallowed the room, bending the air, bending her perception. Mira staggered backward until her legs struck the bed, but there was nowhere left to retreat. The being's limbs shimmered like liquid light. Its form shifted between substance and void, never fully solid, never fully gone. At its center pulsed the same lattice glowing in Mira's wrist, only larger, more complete. The hum deepened. It wasn't sound anymore, but resonance, every molecule in the cabin vibrating in sympathy. The glass on the window fractured with a faint crack. The floorboards groaned as if straining to hold reality together. Mira pressed her hands to her ears, though she knew it was useless. The vibration was inside her, singing in her bones. Her heart stuttered against the rhythm. The being raised its hand, and the lattice on its palm blazed. Mira's wrist burned in reply, the glow racing up her arm, spreading across her chest, branching through her veins like lightning under the skin. She gasped, "Please don't," but the connection locked. Her vision shattered into white. The cabin vanished. When sight returned, she was nowhere she recognized. She stood suspended in a void, her body both present and dissolving, her skin flickering between flesh and light. Around her stretched an endless expanse, not stars, not sky, but a lattice grid stretching into infinity. Glowing lines intersecting like a colossal web dot, and within each node of the grid, a person, hundreds, thousands, millions, every one of them glowing from the wrist, connected by the same burning light. Their faces hovered in silence, some calm, some terrified, some broken. And all of them turned toward her as she arrived. The voice, not one, but many, filled her mind. "Welcome to the bridge." Her stomach dropped into nothing. No, I can't. I don't belong here." But the others pulsed with light, answering without words. "You already do." A shiver ran through the web. The grid quaked like a living thing. Far above, massive forms loomed, ships, geometric and incomprehensible, drifting through the lattice like leviathans in deep water. And then Mira understood. The bridge wasn't metaphor. It wasn't just inside her head. It was real, a vast living structure built of human minds. A network of abductees strung across the earth, their consciousness tethered together. The lattice wasn't decoration. It was circuitry. She was part of it now. Her scream echoed voiceless through the void. But another mirror answered. She turned, and there she was, a reflection of herself standing in the grid, glowing brighter, calmer. This version's lips moved, and the voice pressed directly into her skull. It is not the end. It is the opening. Through us, they arrive. The void trembled. The ships above stirred. Great beams of silver light arced downward, striking the lattice, feeding on its connections. Energy pulsed through Mira's veins, tearing through her heart, her skull. She convulsed with the force of it. And in that instant, the earth appeared below. Her home. A small, fragile sphere floating in the dark. The beams of light lashed toward it, fracturing across continents, weaving the same lattice she saw inside her wrist into the planet's surface. She saw cities dim. She saw skies split with fire. She saw oceans glow with impossible patterns. Humanity was being rewritten, restructured, absorbed into something vast and uncaring. Her body screamed with pain, but her voice came out calm, steady, alien. The words weren't hers, but they slid through her lips as though rehearsed. The bridge is open. We are the anchors. They are here. Her vision broke again, and she was back in the cabin. But it wasn't hers anymore. The walls rippled with symbols. The ceiling glowed with shifting constellations. The triangle outside filled the entire horizon, its beams spearing down into the earth. Figures moved through the open doorway. More and more of them, their long bodies bending light as they entered. Her recorder blinked red. Click. Her voice poured out once more. Steady, certain. This is not sleep paralysis. This is not a dream. If you are hearing me, you are already part of it. Mira's eyes flooded with tears as she sank to her knees, her wrists blazing like a beacon. And outside the cabin, the forest lit up with hundreds of other lights, wrists glowing in the dark. One by one, as people stepped from their homes, their beds, their hiding places, all drawn toward the beams, the visitors had arrived. And the bridge was open.